When did you get?
Number 5.
Send in the clown.
Joker. Joker. Todd Phillips, the director of Hangover, his 2019 deep dive into the infamous, world famous Joker character. I mean, it's a daring, disturbing, and most surprising of it all, it's resonating, you know? It's about the existential dread we feel as isolated creatures in an increasingly hostile and industrialized world. The fact that this film has spoken to so many people, I mean, it really speaks to the visceral, raw, and unflinching mirror it holds to how society regards its most vulnerable members. Although I think a lot of people, critics, think that it's a little bit too nihilistic and too edgy. I mean, I think, like I mentioned for 8th grade, you know, what film can do to paint mental health in this film, I really think it tackles mental health as more of like a public health concern. And like the conversations I've heard coming off of it is like people speaking about mental health as a public health topic, you know? I mean, a film like Joker can do more than any statistical help sheet really can. You know, it really, really delves into being empathetic towards our most vulnerable members. And also, Joaquin Phoenix. I mean, dude, this guy's been a monster since Gladiator. I mean, also, I met him on the set of We Own the Night, which is an underrated film that they shot in my native Jackson Heights, Queens, New York. I mean, his audacious primeval role as the Joker. I mean, I think without him in it, it may have faltered, but with him in it, you know how vulnerable he is. I mean, how touching and gripping his performance is. I think Joker will go down as one of the most boldest comic book films in the modern era. So that's my number 5, Joker. Number 4. The Wailing. So Na Hong Jin's 2016 supernatural psychological horror centers around a policeman investigating a series of mysterious illnesses and killings. South Korean film. I think films like these, the gravitas, the atmosphere of the film, I mean, it's a true testament to South Korean cinema and the decades of bold, genre-shattering film that work that they've been doing. You know, South Korea is always on the forefront of novel ideas in cinema. And also, you know, I had to include a supernatural psychological horror. I mean, ever since The Exorcist, that movie scared the bejesus out of me as a child. Like, I used to stay up and cry at night and not know that I was crying. I mean, that film really had a sick impact on my mind. I mean, I've been fascinated by psychological supernatural films. You know, the film really bridges the two in a really morbid and deeply authentic manner. You know, our disbelief is suspended. There's a cascade of plot twists, creepy and scenic backdrops, unanswered questions, along with a much-needed black humor by the lovable lead, Do Won Kwak. He's always great if you're a fan of South Korean cinema. And like I mentioned, you know, The Wailing, it really, really speaks to why South Korea are the true auteurs and innovators of film. So, like I said for Raman Ragav, please check this movie out. Even if it gets your foot in the door of South Korean cinema, that will be a success. So my number 4 psychological film, The Wailing. Number 3.
Real test. You.
Is it strange to eliminate something that hates you? What will happen to me if I fail your test?
Ex Machina. Alex Garland, writer of 28 Days Later, also a big fan of his book, The Tesseract. His 2015 film is a psychological sci-fi thriller about a young programmer who wins a trip to the secluded Dr. Frankenstein-type laboratory to interact with a female robot in an incredibly emotional, character-driven enterprise carried by strong performances by all 3 leads, particularly Alicia Vikander, who plays the really alluring, artificially intelligent Ava. The introduction of a sci-fi element into the traditional themes we would expect from a psychological thriller really heightened the tension for me. And also, they make for some really great conversations. You know, this film, after I watched it with my friends, I mean, it really kind of sparked a conversation on the fact that, I mean, this type of behavior is going to start being normalized. You know, we already form relationships all through our virtual platforms. You know, people are meeting on all these dating apps. Besides being a psychological film, I think this film is my top 5 films of all time in the past decade. I mean, Alex Garland weaves so much here. Mythology, the visual art. I mean, the scene of Oscar Isaac dancing. And if for those who've seen the film, I mean, right when I said that, a light bulb will go off in your mind. I mean, that's one of the best scenes of all time. It's so bizarre. It's so awesome. Also, shout out to Annihilation, which was criminally underrated. Alex Garland's most recent film. Please check that out as well. But Ex Machina, if you haven't checked it out, please do so. That's my number 3. Number 2. The Handmaiden. Not The Handmaiden's Tale, even though I've heard that's good. The Handmaiden. Park Chan-wook. If you don't know that name, please pause this video and go watch Old Boy. Go watch the rest of the Vengeance trilogy, Joint Security Area, Thirst. I mean, this guy's been killing it for at least 20 years. He also did Stoker in this past decade, which I really liked. Some people didn't like it. That was also deeply unsettling and bizarre. But I think I think The Handmaiden is amongst the best psychological thrillers of all time. It's up there with Memento, Seven, Silence of the Lambs. It's a love story. It's a revenge thriller. It's psychological character-driven piece on a Japanese occupied Korea in the 1930s. I really think one of the strong themes of the film is about artistic creation, you know, the obsessive compulsion, attention to detail that it takes to create great art, and also the impact that has on one's psychology, you know. It's candid, it's beautiful, it's horrid, it's perverse, it's violent. I mean, the film is handled with such sharpness. I mean, you feel like you're amongst the audience when Hideko is reading her erotic stories. I love the blending of genres here, the visual elements, the tone that it carries. Like I said, you know, South Korean cinema, the best cinema that's happening right now. Number 1.
What does a baby computer call its father?
I don't know what.
Data.
It's so quiet.
I've never loved anyone the way I love you.
Me too. Now we know how.
Her. So, you know, I remember being an undergraduate in psychology almost 10 years ago, just about the time when smartphones were really starting to get big. And, you know, there was so much enthusiasm and conversation surrounding research. You know, how would we interact with this virtual world being at our fingertips? You know, would we be learning new languages? Would we be creating art, new genres of music? A decade later, and we have the research is in. We are using phones at our disposal for one purpose, amongst many, but for one main purpose, and that's not to be so freaking lonely. Instagram, Snapchat, Tinder, dating apps, TikTok, Facebook, these are the most often used platforms by a long shot. Spike Jonze's Her, I think, it's a landmark in filmmaking. I think it's the precipice of a generation of human beings who won't know any other world than one in which robots, AI, and creating virtual selves is as normal to what we know as reality as going for a walk in the park. It reminds me of Castaway, actually, you know, where Tom Hanks forms this deep friendship with Wilson, you know, the volleyball. But, you know, Her is just an up-to-date version of that. This is one of the best psychological character studies that I think that we have, you know, on what it means to be isolated as a human being, what it means to be lonely, what it means to love, what it means to be a human going forward in this 21st, 22nd century, you know. Her, check it out. those are my top 10 favorite psychological films of the past decade. Can't wait for what the 2020s have in store. 2020s, man, I can't believe I'm saying that. It's like we're in the future already. I'm also going to do a top 10 spiritual films of the past decade, which I'll be releasing in about a week or two, where I'll be looking at films that delve more into the spiritual nature of human beings. The title of the channel is Psychology of Spirituality, so I'm going to explore both. Also, I'm a huge fan of film, so it's going to be appropriate. Thank you guys for tuning in today's episode. Please subscribe and support the channel. I'm here on Christmas break. I'm going to put out a lot more content. Halfway through my PhD, I'm going to keep you guys updated with different research facets going on with my dissertation. Give you guys updates with therapy and research. Really excited for what's in store. And with that, I wish you guys the best. Thank you.